Okay.
Hi, welcome to another in a series of training videos for NATECLA Scotland. Today I'm going to talk to three CELTA trainers from Dundee and Angus College about their most recent experience with the CELTA course, which for the first time was delivered online. So with me today I've got Sue Hain, Amanda Avison and Ali Kerr, who are all experienced CELTA trainers. So can I start with a question for you, Ali? You started the most recent CELTA intending to run a blended course. What was your original timetable and what delivery platform did you use?
So we knew from the outset that part of the course was going to have to be online. So we planned for the first half of the course to be theory-based, so using the units only. And the second part of the course was going to be the practical aspect, and doing that, we were hoping face-to-face. So the first part, we used the Cambridge Moodle system, and the trainees were asked every week to work through about 2 or 3, depending on how heavy the units were, 2 or 3 units, and then Sue and I would meet them in a live room and feedback on the units that they'd read about and things that they'd done. They also did the discussion forums and any forum tasks that were required from Cambridge. We asked them to do these as well. So the trainees were, talking to each other out with the live room times and giving feedback to each other on the points and discussion forums that they'd contributed to. And then, as I said, the practical aspect we were hoping would be in the second part of the course, and we were hoping to marry these together.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. So obviously input sessions in particular are normally face-to-face. So from a trainer's point of view, what were the most challenging aspects of online delivery? Amanda?
For me personally, it was to do with monitoring what was actually happening, what the trainees were doing, and in particular the lack of ability to peer check. Of course we can use breakout rooms, but breakout rooms are very time consuming. You can't just set them up all of the time to let people just have a quick chat. I mean, that's kind of bonkers. So I think also it depends which bit you're talking about. If you're talking about the Cambridge units, I think there was a slight question mark over what they were actually doing with them and how much they were taking in. And although we knew they had to do discussion tasks and things, there were ways round them where you could click for the answers. And I just, I think when somebody's in the classroom in front of you and everybody's working together, everybody knows what has been done and what hasn't been done, and that discussion has occurred and whatever. I think that the discussion boards and things, tasks they had to do were good, but I think they did have ways round if they chose to take them. So I'm not sure in terms of monitoring. I think probably just the student interaction, that it's a very different student interaction. Sorry, what student or trainee interaction, whoever it is. So for me, that felt quite different. I'm sure the others will want to add something to this.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. How about you, Sue? Were there any aspects of online delivery which added to the trainees' experience and maybe could be used in the future?
Well, maybe I could just pick up on something that Amanda just said too, because I think, Ali and I found using the materials from Cambridge, where it was very different to doing the face-to-face. As you said, Peter, normally our input sessions are face-to-face, and we tried to combat that, and also to try to combat what Amanda was describing, whereby you can kind of work through a unit-ish by our live rooms and by setting our own tasks and quizzes. Mm-hmm. So we would recycle and revisit, and just sometimes it was pair work, small group work. Sometimes we asked them to do a presentation or do a quiz, just to check that they had actually picked up on the aspects of the particular units that they were studying, because there was a delay between the input of course, as you know, normally the teaching practice is 2 days later. There was 2 months later. So they were actually getting a lot of theory and, you know, so I suppose that's one of the more of the difficulties that we had to sort of work very collaboratively as a trainer team and work ways. We worked it out as we went along, I think, is be fair to say, Ellie. You know, we found ways of working, but there are aspects of online delivery which, yeah, maybe, you know, something for the future. So for example, normally we would have on our part-time course a Tuesday evening and all day Thursday. If you're traveling, and we had people who were in Inverness and Glasgow, so to travel to Dundee, for example, for a 3-hour session on a Tuesday night is quite an undertaking, whereas that could be online. So we could adapt certain aspects, I think, to be delivered online and maybe meet the needs of some people, including COVID regulations, if, you know, in the future there's more restrictions and changes at short notice like there have been over the past few months. So it was interesting. I mean, you could design a very different sort of input to what we had. We had to just take what Cambridge provided and deliver because we were literally straight into the course. But I think if we were to rethink it, we would develop and use our own materials by putting them on our own system, and that's Teams. So all apart from the Cambridge Moodle, everything else was conducted over Teams.
Yeah, and Teams worked very well.
Yeah, it did actually.
And that was another positive for the trainees, certainly. They, you know, they're now expert at teaching online, and you know, they're very au fait with delivery online, and they came up with some good ideas, referring back to what Amanda said earlier on about not, you know, peer checking. I mean, they came up with the idea of, you know, sort of a semi-peer check by putting answers into the chat boxes and things like that.
Yeah, they had
So
some
they
good
came
ideas.
up with their own ideas and their own ways of doing things, which I've taken up in my online teaching as well now, you know, for some of it, you know. It's a bit detrimental to students who are working on their mobile phones, for example. Typing an answer in the chat box isn't the most ideal thing, but actually most of the students are on desktops and it worked really well, you know, for one or two activities in the class.
Yeah, and I think also having a lot of not face-to-face contact, video-to-video contact. I think I got to know the trainees slightly better than I maybe would normally get the opportunity to, because if they come in for a Tuesday evening, they're there, you deliver, they go. Then you have your own teaching practice group, but quite often, you know, it's not till halfway through the course that you get that we swap over. So I feel we had lots of chats and lots of group sessions, and they were very supportive of each other and had a WhatsApp group. And so I think that the online, or at least the technology side of things, actually did work very positively in many ways. Challenging.
Excuse me. Yeah.
And another thing I liked about the online delivery was that the trainees, of course, had to prepare their boards in advance. So it meant that they were, it was almost like lesson planning times 3, you know, because, you know, they were thinking about their lesson, then they had to devise their boards, so they would be thinking about what they were doing again. So I think it did benefit their lesson planning as well, in terms of they found out quickly enough what worked and what didn't work and what had to be on the board and organisation.
On the whole, they got that all the admin to us, you know, a day before their actual lessons. So it gave us an opportunity to read through and maybe have an opportunity to give more in-depth feedback than just getting it 2 minutes before a lesson, watching a lesson and immediately feeding back. So I think, you know, that worked.
That definitely helped me as a trainee. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
I mean,
compared to the first course I did, where I was trying to read everything just literally seconds before they started, compared to receiving it the night before. I mean, for me personally, being inexperienced, that made a really, really big difference. So that was interesting.
There was, you know, it allows you to really, really look at what they're doing and not feel as if you're very quickly having to sort of feedback. Yeah, I think that's a positive.
Okay.
But the only, I think that, sorry, I was just going to say there is a downside to that, and that is that as a trainer, you feel at times as if you're working 7 days a week at various times, you know, on top of your other work, because you're meeting needs out with normal timetabled hours, just because that's the nature of, so if we had trainees who worked all day, they might be contacting us in the evening or submitting things in the evening and or the weekend, and it felt very different to the way a normal CELTA would run, where it's very much contained within certain hours of the timetable. I think, do you agree with that?
Yeah, that was perhaps because of, you know, because we were using Teams as well, and it was such an easy mode of communication. You know, they would,
possibly,
you know, if they wanted to send us a message, you know, because we had it on our phones or, you know, our desktops, which were always on hand, you always read the message and then felt the need to respond to it as well, you know. So yeah, you were there pretty much whenever they needed you. So yes, definitely, we put, you know, there was a lot of extra hours working, if you like.
I think having experienced that, we would be in a position now to actually take that into account when we were planning the next course, like, you know, so we would protect our time and give a little bit more guidance about when we could be available. I think that would be a way of combating that.
Okay.
Just not answering messages.
So just picking up on the teaching practice, obviously all the assessed lessons had to take place online. Which aspects do you think were most affected by this? For example, TTT, error correction. Amanda?
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You go ahead, Sue, it's okay.
No, I was just going to say, TTT, I mean, I noticed as a teacher this year, because of all our online, that I was speaking a lot more than I would ever have wanted to be, because you have to communicate. And I wish I had a tenor for saying every time I had to say switch your mic off or mute or whatever. But so that was one thing. And Amanda, what did you want to add anything to?
Well, I think I was really very frustrated by the monitoring situation, and I also think that the trainees did not get a proper flavour of what it is to monitor a room, because they thought they were monitoring by popping in and out of breakout rooms for literally 1 minute, and it really is not the same thing at all. So I think that's one thing that is very, very different. As I said before about peer checking, the other thing that I think was interesting, and you could take this as a positive and a negative, but they really, really had to have really good instructions and ICQs. And if they didn't have them, then everything unraveled really fast. So when you're in a classroom together, you have a much better idea of what's happening, what your students in the room, you know, are doing. But when we had the trainees online with their students, if they hadn't given clear instructions and they hadn't checked the instructions, they found that out quite quickly. And they also found out what happened when they didn't give clear instructions and they sent them all off to the breakout rooms. And when they got there, it was chaos. So I think that the instruction giving and checking became very, very important, and probably more significant because of the lack of being able to see what's going on. I don't know if you Ali and Sue, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, I think in any face-to-face class, you know, CCQs and ICQs are always things that in the very first few lessons anyway are constantly, you know, and I think it was negative and positive because they did have to focus and they really did have to think. And if they take that into a future classroom experience, then that's great. But the lack of being able to monitor properly and the whole aspect of reading the room and the classroom management of a room is so different online.
Lack of physical movement, lack of tasks which involved any kind of physical dimension, be it moving pieces of paper around, be it ranking, be it actually physically moving in a room. And all of this really helps change the dynamics and timing in a lesson. And they didn't really get the benefit of that, I think.
I was going to ask about the choice of activities and what how that impacted being online.
Ali, do you want to? Yeah, we've been talking.
Certain things obviously worked better than others. I think once they got the hang of the breakout rooms, actually nearly everything was possible, especially if everybody's technology was working and there were no blips or whatever. But I can't think of anything that didn't work in terms of activities, obviously, apart from the moving around aspect and the peer checking, etc. Like we were talking before, and monitoring. Can you think of anything, Sue? I can't think of anything just off the top of my head here.
I mean, I think they some of them did try to devise. So, we've all found this year that teaching our normal classes, what you would normally do automatically in a classroom, we've had to sit and really think through, and how do I adapt that to make it work, in an online environment. And so they did have to do a bit of that, because they use teaching points from the course books, and we were encouraging them, as you would always do, to sort of lift it off the page and develop their own take on it. But some came up with some really nice ideas. But yes, it was a whole learning experience really for them and us, to be fair.
I think there was a difference between what was possible in the upper intermediate group compared to the pre-intermediate group.
Yeah.
Because things like putting things into chat boxes and whatever, sending information into breakout rooms and things is much more easily achieved at the upper intermediate level than it is at the pre-intermediate level.
And technology played a part.
Yeah.
Some days it worked perfectly, other days it didn't. And we had a bit of an issue in the setup in teams within our institution. Students, we weren't able to set the meetings up and go into the breakout rooms and monitor them, because the trainees, had to set their own meetings up so they could do that. So as trainers, we had to just sit and wait while they were in breakout rooms. We couldn't see what was happening. And when they came back out, if they did something like delayed correction, we could kind of, get an idea that they had obviously taken something on board and tried to feed back, but it didn't. So some of the activities we didn't necessarily really see how they. I mean, trainees will come out and say, "Oh, that went really well. Yeah, that's great," but we didn't see it. So
didn't see it. So I think that is a problem really, and it's quite frustrating.
That's an internal thing though. That's just could be easily changed if we were given a different access just for the CELTA trainees. Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask, how did you ensure that all trainees felt supported throughout the course?
That's for Sue and Ali.
Well,
I think we touched on it before, because of how we were delivering it, because the teams and everything, we were pretty much available whenever the trainees needed us. And in fact, they were they were better supported than they would normally have been, as we mentioned before, because we were available, and normally feedback on assignments would just come in paper copy, really, on the feedback sheet, whereas we were able to facilitate meetings, just short meetings with each trainee, just to check that they understood what our feedback was, if it was a resubmission, which probably we wouldn't have been able to do on a face-to-face, you wouldn't have had time to do on a face-to-face course. So I think then the feedback we got from the trainees was all hugely appreciative of the support that was given to them. So I don't see in any future course that's delivered online, I don't really see any need why that can't be replicated again. Support for trainees should be there if it's needed, and it was needed in this case, and it was given. As far as I'm concerned, Sue.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And when they did have certain tasks to do using the Cambridge Online, Ali and I would monitor them, and we would then provide feedback directly to their site on some of the things that they'd been commenting about. So there was a lot of informal feedback and support. And I think we got to know them, and maybe some of them felt more able to just contact us and speak to us on a more personal level than perhaps normally, just because we
think
were
that was
in
the-
touch a lot.
Yeah. I think that was the natures of Teams anyway, you know, or the online thing, you know, because if you were setting up a live room, invariably Sue and I would be in 5 minutes early. One or two of the trainees would be in 5 minutes early before the official start, and you know, then obviously it leads naturally just to chat and to finding out, you know, more about each other, and I think that led to a much more personal relationship with the trainees.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, that was definitely a positive.
Okay. Amanda, you completed your trainer in training on the course, and I know you've already shadowed a normal part-time CELTA, but what did you see as the main differences and drawbacks? And were there any positives you could take forward?
I think in this particular instance, which would not normally be the case, there was a very big difference in that because we had to change the TP sessions. There was that big gap between the input and the TP, which wouldn't necessarily happen in the future, but that was actually a significant difference, I think. I think, you know, there were the odd problems like technical issues, maybe a time delay. Personally, I think that there are elements of pronunciation which are harder to teach online. That's my personal opinion. You can do some basic pronunciation work, but I'm still to be convinced that it's easier or better. I think that there was more teacher talking time or trainee talking time in general. And given that quite a lot of us are prone to that normally, it was difficult, you know, it was difficult to expect them to really slash that. I think the positive things are that they could complete those units in their own time. It gave them more flexibility. They were working, they have families. That helps them. It really helps to be, say, online for the Tuesday night, I think, going forward. I think that's definitely something. As I said before, because I was a trainee, it really helped me to get that paperwork the night before. I felt a bit more in control of what I was looking out for, and it helped me to give the feedback because I had more time to think. I think that I think in terms of the Cambridge input, the Cambridge units, I quite liked some of the interviews they did between members of staff and also between students, and using that as a kind of loop input to give students activities, the trainees activities. And there were some elements of the Cambridge online course that I thought were really nice, the way they recycled the same material but using it for different purposes. So I thought that there were some elements there which were nice, and that we could, if in the future we developed our own work, we might take some of this methodology and some of their ideas and apply them to our own workplace and our own colleagues and our own students. So I think that we can also learn from, you know, by adapting that online experience and take that forward as well, actually partly into the face-to-face and maybe partly online. So I think we can always learn from seeing a different way of doing something.
Okay, thanks very much, Amanda. My final question is, between the three of you, could you sum up the experience in a few well-chosen adjectives?
Here's a nice positive one, collaborative.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Challenging.
Yes, I was going to say challenging.
That's probably all of us.
Challenging from all of us. Yeah.
Demanding in that we had to set it up initially, and I don't think it would be as demanding in the future, you know, for future courses. But it was certainly demanding in this particular course.
It was very interesting.
What Amanda was saying about TTT, I think definitely the trainees had higher TTT, but I think we've all found in the online teaching we're all doing commentary.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
It's completely natural to say to the students, I'm just going to share my screen, for example, as a way of A, filling the time, but also B, checking that they can actually see the screen as well. So I think
it's a link sort of, totally
different double
different
purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And I would add that it was fun, and we did actually have a really great group of trainees, and you know, so it was fun.
Yeah, I would add successful, because everybody everybody did well and passed, and it was a challenging time, but we all, you know, learned a lot from it.
We did.
And it was
Certainly did.
satisfying at the end as well.
Very satisfying, yeah. And it was lovely working very closely with my lovely colleagues in a way we don't normally, you know.
Yeah.
No, not that we do work well together. I mean, daily.
Yes, continuously.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm missing the girls.
I know. We used to speak every day, at least once.
Well, anyway, thank you all very much. That was very interesting and enlightening. So thank you for your insight, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, and have a good summer.
Thanks very much,
Okay.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm going
Bye.
to stop recording now soon.